Welcome back, Crackle Addicts. I'm Lupinefiasco. This is Daily Fab gameplay, and even though the player base's attention is largely on the Hunted, our new Draconic heroes, and the array of new Arachnes, I want to give a little more time to Aurora. I think she is a strong hero heading into the Hunted. She is especially strong against Zen when compared to at least our Draconic ninjas, both of whom are very bad into Zen state. I think Aurora has a very good shot at being a top-tier hero in Road to Nationals, just as she was a top-tier hero at the end of the Rosetta meta. And I do want to provide some updates to my personal list. Many, if not all of these, are informed by Pudding Tam's Calling Kuala Lumpur and Battle-Hardened Hong Kong lists. I bought his guide on Metafy and applied many of the lessons I learned from that to my personal list. This is not a one-to-one copy. There are some changes, which I will be reviewing. If you want to try this list for yourself on Talishar, there is a Favery deck link in the video description below. There is also a link to my Blue Sky, my Discord, and my Patreon. Patrons at the Arc Lightning tier and above will get the matchup guide to this list, as well as the matchup guide to all of my deck lists, including most recently Syndra and Phi. And while you are down in the video description, you could also hit the subscribe button if you aren't already subscribed to my channel. It is the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see every new episode of Daily Fab gameplay in your YouTube feed. But returning to the list itself and the changes I have made since my last Aurora update, you can see that this is fairly extensive. We've made 12 substitutions, and I'll start by talking about the cuts. First up is Lightning Greaves, which feels like a very weird cut to make. You would think that this is one of Aurora's better pieces of equipment. If nothing else, it is the Lightning Legendary from Rosetta. It blocks 1, it has Arcane Barrier 1, it has a very strong effect when combined with Gone in a Flash. So why aren't we playing Lightning Greaves? And the simple answer is that in our main 60, we're playing 6 blues. There are 9 blues total in this list. In many of our aggro matchups, we actually go down to 3 blues, and against Viserai in particular, where you would expect Lightning Greaves to be at its best, we're playing 3 blues and 3 Warmonger's Diplomacies, which we don't want to pitch, we want to play. So there is just very little chance that we are actually pitching to Arcane Barrier rather than blocking incoming physical damage or holding onto our reds to either block with or play. Lightning Greaves just isn't something that I'm ever really equipping anymore. I'm bringing Snapdragon Scalers into most, if not all, of my matchups. So let's just cut Greaves, play Snapdragons, be a better aggressive deck, and use our reds to either block or push damage rather than pitch to Arcane Barrier. Next up is Blast to Oblivion, a card that I was very excited about. The problem with Blast is that it just isn't very good defensively. The reason that you would play Blast is to bounce your own Channel Lightning Valley back to your hand, reset the flow counters on it, and get more uses out of it. But that was only half of the picture. We were playing Blast in addition to returning our own Channel Lightning Valley to get our opponent's auras off of the battleground. So it was very good against Zen on an Arc Lightning turn. We could use it to bounce Zen state back to their hand. Against Viserai's or Enigmas, we could return Moonchants or Spectral Shields. But the problem with Blast is, as I experimented and tested, it just wasn't really doing enough of that. For Zen, I am at a point where I am boarding Arc Lightning out of my deck and preferring to play more of a block to, send to sort of style. So we're never really getting the value out of Blast by bouncing a Zen state, because we are never putting ourselves into a position where Blast is able to do that. As far as Viserai is concerned, yeah, if we play Blast and then hit it with a Lightning Press or Electrostatic Discharge or even Somersault, we can get a Rune Chant off of the arena, but that's it. We don't want to return Malefic Incantation to Viserai's hand because Viserai just gets to play it again and gives it a new set of verse counters. So Blast to Oblivion always had the potential to be okay, but it never had the potential to be great. And if it's never being great, we want to replace it with something that is usually great, which I will be getting to when I talk about the additions to the deck. Moving on to Sigil of Solace. This is a good card. It synergizes very well with Flittering Charge and Gone in a Flash. I have talked about this card as far as it being an instant for our instant synergies that also acts as a pseudo blocker because gaining 3 life is effectively the same as blocking 3 life, unless you are getting hit by on hits, and that is why ultimately we're cutting Sigil of Solace and replacing it with cards that block better. We want to block Zen's on hits like Mauling Chi or Tiger Swipe on a big turn. We want to block Viscerize on hits like anything influenced by Succumb to Temptation. We want to be able to block enemy Aurora on hits like Burn Up or Channel Lightning Valley. And so Sigil of Solace acts as a pseudo blocker in that it gains us 3 life, but it's only ever the 3 life. We never get to get additional value from blocking an on hit like a Snatch or something empowered by Burn Up, where our actual physical blocking, putting a 3-block card in front of a Snatch, gets us more than 3 points of value because we deny that draw effect, or the 4 arcane from Burn Up, or the draw from Channel Lightning Valley. So yes, Sigil of Solace is very synergistic, but as we are moving into this block 2 send 2 style of Aurora play, we just want cards that block. We want physical block value, which Sigil of Solace does not provide. Cutting 2 Flicker Wisps is a concession to the fact that we are boarding out Arc Lightning in a lot of matchups, and that we just don't really need Flicker Wisp's effect to win some of our games. Against something like CYB Bravo, you're going to run into trouble because you don't have Flicker Wisp, but CYB Bravo very often loses to Enigma, and if Enigma has a place in the hunted meta, then CY Bravo is kind of just dead. Every Guardian is kind of just dead. Jarl is kind of just dead, so we don't really need Flicker Wisp for that. And if we are thinking about the aggro matchups in which we would run Arc Flicker, talking about our Zens and our Dash-IOs, Dash-IO got a big nerf from High Octane. Dash-IO also has a problem dealing with the new Flexors piece of leg equipment that can turn a blue into 6 block value, spread across multiple potential hit triggers for Boon Grenade. Dash-IO just doesn't really have a place in the meta anymore. She didn't since High Octane was banned and continues to have even less of a place now that Flexors are in the game. And as far as your Zens that we might have wanted to Arc Flicker and try to kill through a Zen state or a traverse turn, we are just adjusting our strategy so that we are blocking the Zen better. We're playing a longer, more grindy mid-range type of game, and Flicker Wisp just doesn't really lend itself to that. We are keeping our 1 copy of Flicker Wisp in the sideboard, and that is for our Count Your Blessings decks, for our Enigmas. Enigma being another deck that Aurora kind of just doesn't need Arc Flicker for. Aurora is just favored enough into Enigma that we can mostly just kill her. So we do keep our 1 copy of Flicker Wisp in the board, but we don't need 2 additional copies. So 2 Flicker Wisps are out. Finally, we are cutting Heaven's Claws. This goes to the fact that we are playing fewer blues, and we are playing hands that don't require so many blues. Heaven's Claws was always our worst blue, behind Current Funnel, Sigil of Lightning, and Warmonger's Diplomacy. And while we do still have those 9 blues in the list, for the most part, we are never running 9 blues in a single matchup. We are more often running 3 blues in a single matchup, and Heaven's Claws just doesn't have a place. We never, ever wanted to play Heaven's Claws. It was always just a 3-block blue lightning card, and we have adjusted the deck to the point where we don't need it. So we are cutting the chaff. And we do have some noticeable cuts, as I said, Lightning Greaves being the biggest one. 2 copies of Flicker Wisp are also pretty significant cuts. So what are we boarding in? What have we added to the deck to compensate for what are some pretty big cuts? First one is Balance of Justice. Balance of Justice was always a good piece of equipment. It has its fringe uses over Crown of Providence, those being against all of our brutes that might play Bloodrush Bellows, being against Dash and Dash IO for their Cerebellum processor turns with Spark of Genius. We can play it against Aurora for turns where she would get multiple Channel Lightning Valley triggers or Channel Lightning Valley and Snatch. Channel Lightning Valley and E-Strike and Snatch, what have you. We are also playing it for Jarl, not because Jarl is ever going to draw 2 cards in a turn, but because this can block an attack for 2 and then not be destroyed, like Crown of Providence would, opening up an equipment slot for Frostbite. So Balance of Justice does have some pretty fringe uses. If Enigma starts to fall off in the hunted meta, creating space for Jarl, then having equipment that blocks 2 and sticks around is going to be even more important than it already is. We're bringing in Shock Charmers for the Wizards. So why are we running Shock Charmers instead of Lightning Greaves? The reason is that we still have our Dyadic Carapace, which has Arcane Barrier 2. So on a turn where we draw into a blue, we can still send our normal line of Lightning Attack, Starfall, Attack, float 2 resources, and pass the turn. That means that if Kano decides to pop off, we can put those 2 floating resources into AB2, or if Kano has been blocking and we feel like he doesn't have much of a turn, we can put it into Embodiment of Lightning or Grasp of the Arknight. We just don't have a need for that 3rd point of Arcane Barrier. Meanwhile, Shock Charmers just sits on the board. It is Spell Void 2. So we can put Shock Charmers and 2 floating resources into Dyadic Carapace and Spell Void 2, and that cancels out the entirety of an Aether Wildfire. So the Shock Charmers is here just for wizard protection. You can bring this in against your Asilios as well, and it will do a better job of insulating you from Kano than Lightning Greaves would. We're always running Dyadic Carapace because it blocks 3 in your aggro matchups. We would board it out for Tunic in some of our longer matchups, but having Carapace and Shock Charmers for Wizard is just more helpful than having Carapace and Lightning Greaves. We don't have room for more than 1 piece of extra Wizard protection, and Shock Charmers is just more useful than Greaves. Scar for a Scar is a new addition to the deck. With our play pattern of block 2, send 2, Scar for a Scar is a way to either send one of those 2 pieces of attacking cards as your starter or your finisher, or if you can manipulate your life total based on incoming damage, you can potentially keep more than 2 cards in hand to attack with, one of them being Scar for a Scar. It gives you flexibility in how you manage your life total, and that is very cool. It is also just a 0 for 4, which is what Aurora wants to be doing. Scar for a Scar has been in the game since Welcome to Wraith. Many aggro decks have played it. We all know what it's capable of, and now Aurora is doing it too. Next up, we've got Sink Below. Following our trend of 0 for 4s that don't use our action point, Sink Below is coming in. Very strong card, provides hand fixing, which in our deck can be very useful as you may have 3 attacks in hand and no way to give them go again, 3 instants and no attack to use them on, or maybe you just want to try to turn a red into a blue or a red into a better red. Sink Below helps us in our matchups where we want to grind out a bit more, our Zens, that we just get extra value for playing a 0 for 4, and then get additional hand fixing. Sink Below is going to be in our sideboard for the most part, but when it does come in, it is very strong with our block 2, send 2 style of play. Static Shock comes back in. This was quite a player in early Aurora lists and eventually made its way out of decks as we just wanted more ways to send cards, to send value. Static Shock didn't have go again. It wasn't a lightning card, so it just didn't really provide in the way that we needed to, but now that we are moving back to this block 2, send 2 style of play, Static Shock comes back into the deck. It is a good defensive card. It's a 3-block attack action. It blocks 3 on its own. It works very well with Electromagnetic Somersault on offense, it can create many 2-card 8s. Static Shock plus Lightning Press is 8 points of damage. Electromagnetic Somersault and Static Shock is 5 points of damage that puts an attack into your arsenal. Electrostatic Discharge and Static Shock is a 2-card 8. Lightning Surge and Static Shock is a 2-card 9. So there are many ways to get additional value out of Static Shock, make it this 0 for 5, and that makes it good enough to keep playing. And finally, we bring in our third copy of Sigil of Lightning. This was out of the deck for a long time, as we were playing closer to 8 blues in many of our matchups, and we're playing a single copy of Warmonger's Diplomacy to complement the Sigil of Lightning. But the fact that we have so much more block value in our deck, between Static Shock, Sink Below, Scar for a Scar, we can afford to play what is just a better blue for the most part. In the vast majority of our matchups, Sigil of Lightning is just better than Warmonger's Diplomacy. So we are bringing it in as our 6th blue most of the time. Finally, we'll take a look at the deck in context. This is your 60 for the most part. We will be playing Crown of Providence, Dyadic Carapace, Grasp of the Arknight, and Snapdragon Scalers as your primary loadout. Your reds, for the most part, are just 0 for 4s with Go Again. We are playing Sigil of Suffering main board. This was in my sideboard for a long time, but with our Block 2 Sense 2 style of play, Sigil is just always useful, especially when you compare it with Channel Lightning Valley. We scroll down, we see that our 6 blues in most matchups are Current Funnel and Sigil of Lightning. Current Funnel being a 3-block lightning blue that occasionally has utility on offense. Sigil of Lightning playing into our instant synergies and blocking for pitching for 3. And finally, we have our sideboard of Exude Confidence for defensive matchups, Sink Below for matchups where we really lean into the Block 2 Send 2. I have Vaporize as my big difference from Pudding's list. I think it is excellent against Viserai and Vinset in particular, but you can also bring it into your Aurora mirrors to snipe Embodiments of Lightning and Channel Lightning Valleys. So that is my quick Aurora update. This is the list that I am most likely to be experimenting with for Road to Nationals season, while I work with Syndra and Phi to get them closer to solved. Again, patrons will have the matchup guide for this list available through my Discord, but for anyone who wants to try this list, I think it's very good. I think it's a very sensible pick for Road to Nats, and I hope that you experiment, iterate with it, and find success on Talishar or in your paper testing leading up to the Road to Nats season. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, be sure to Static Shock, Lightning Press, Arcanic Shockwave that like button. And if you have not already done so, please consider a YouTube subscription. It's the best free way to support me. I have a Patreon, a Blue Sky, and a Discord, links to which can be found in the video description below. I'll be back later this week with a Phi deck tech as we move forward into the Hunted and our return to Draconic Ninja. So until then, take care.